Hello, everybody. I may introduce myself. I'm Voglin Jungmann, teaching Korean art history at UCLA, which means that I'm a little bit more east of Dunhuang, a little bit further away. However, Dunhuang has played quite a role in my own studies and training from early on. And I'm very honored, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to introduce this panel on Dunhuang, East and West. And of course, it's just a wonderful project. I was especially thrilled to see the Diamond Sutra, the earliest known woodblock print in the world, which has kind of accompanied me through my student and later life. And to have all these treasures here in one place in Los Angeles is just great. So my thanks also to all the supporters and organizers of this project. I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Valérie Zaleski, who is a curator of Buddhist art from China and Central Asia at the Musée Guimet in Paris. And she will talk to us about, or her talk actually has the title, Toward an Identification of Some Bodhisattvas in Monks' Robes in Paintings from Dunhuang. Please welcome Valérie Zaleski.
So I would like first to thank the Getty and the organizer of the symposium and the nice exhibition, and thanking them for being there on my behalf. So my topic today will be very specific, especially compared to the previous subjects. Oh. Oops, I have it. It's okay? To the right, okay, thank you. So, among the paintings from the manuscript caves in Dunhuang, there are three images, two painted on silk. Okay. Among the paintings from the manuscript cave in Dunhuang, there are three images, two painted on silk, banners, and one on paper, preserved in the Musée Guimet and in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which have been identified as Bodhisattva images without further precision, as many of this kind of paintings difficult to identify precisely without the help of any inscription inside the labels. The three figures are clad as monks, but wear a crown, and sometimes jewels, and their long hair are partly tied in bun as bodhisattvas' hairdress. So, they might be Kshitigarbha, Ditsang Bodhisattva, which is commonly depicted on banners from Dunhuang, wearing a monk's cloak and jewels. Sorry for... But those three have not been identified as Ditsang, as they differ from its Dunhuang images by the presence of a crown instead of the monk's shaved head usually depicted for this figure, and because of the absence of any specific object attributed to this deity. Jewel, Chintamani, and mendicant staff, Kakara, though sometimes he holds only a water flask, as for instance here in the National Museum of New Delhi. Okay. They also appear different from another type, not precisely identified yet, with monk's garb and jewels, but with a bodhisattva's diadem instead of a crown. This leads to wonder which deity they might represent, as the type of crown and the monk's cloak is not that of a specified bodhisattva. Apart from no. I don't know. Okay. Apart from the hybrid aspect of monk bodhisattva, one is holding a vase with lustral water, kamandalu, and both wear a three-pointed crown of either Indian or Central Asian type. Indeed, on these images, the crown, rather than being a diadem with roundels, has either the shape of a goldsmithery tiara with three Indian-type high finials, as known on a group of Khotanese-style banners. You have two here. Or it looks like a three-faceted crown, well known on painted images of the Lokapala presiding to the north, and a protector to Khotan, Vaishravana, where a Central Asian influence has been noticed. You have many examples here. But in both cases, as we may surmise, either by the presence of two additional smaller ornaments or by the 5 jewels placed at the top of the 3 points and at intermediate spots. I have to go back. You see it here. I'm afraid. Here. And here and here. The crowns may also be related to crowns with 5 elements devoted to jinas or dhyani Buddhas, well known in Dunhuang by a few items in paper. Apart from images of Vaishravana, this type of 3 or 5-pointed crown appears on images of Bodhisattva Maitreya from Central Asia, on 6th century pieces from Khotan, and on a stamp from Duldur Akur. On the other hand, the 3-faceted or 3-section crown reminds as well the 3-fold-spreading late Northern Way type found frequently in Longmen and in some dated way images of Maitreya. It is also the same type of crown which is worn by later images depicting bejeweled Buddhas from Karakoto, one dating from the 13th century and modeled in clay, the other one dating from the... Sorry for that. The other one dating from the 14th century and painted on silk. The issue of the identification of these 2 bejeweled Buddha images from Karakoto has been questioned, leading to consider that this figure was popular among Tanguts and Mongols. We may note that there are also several images of Maitreya painted on stucco or on silk, and one embroidered from the same period and the same sites. The crown Buddha painted on silk has the hair of a bodhisattva and a depiction in his right-hand palm of a coin from the last emperor of the Northern Yuan dynasty, Tianyuan, whose capital city was Karakoto. Though probably aiming at showing supreme generosity of the fulfiller of wishes, the paradoxical presence of such a sign of mundane world on an image of a bejeweled Buddha has been noticed. Furthermore, this coin might simply place this painting in a historical context with the will to associate the Emperor Tianyuan with the bejeweled Buddha as a Chakravartin, and thus to identify Tianyuan with the Chakravartin. The unusual style of this painting among the scrolls from Karakoto has been pointed out. Indeed, this image, rather than showing Sinicized or Tibetan characters, Sinicized or Tibetan characters, has a Central Asian flavor, as well as some features reminiscent of some Dunhuang paintings, though somewhat stiffened. They're noticeable in the depiction of the garment and the lotus, in features of the faces, and even in the locks of hair around the ears. So, here. Oops. So this type of crown seems to have been significant in Central Asia, apart from the depictions of Vaishravana, for 2 types of Buddhist images, that is, Bodhisattva Maitreya and the bejeweled Buddha. Would it be then possible that the bejeweled monk from figures from Dunhuang would be related to one or the other of those figures? In Dunhuang, bejeweled Buddha images are known on the iconographic painting images from the Stein collection, the part in New Delhi National Museum, depicting famous Buddhist images, which shows 4 of them. Among these 4 images of bejeweled Buddha, one is wearing a 3-pointed crown. Oops. Here. A 3-pointed crown. But he's not named by his inscription because of the moon crescents on his halo. Oops. Here. It has been tentatively identified as Bodhisattva Chandra Prabha. But rather than appearing as a bodhisattva, he really looks like a Buddha, with urna, monk's robe, and no long hair, but adorned with an armlet and a large necklace with pendants, showing a mixed appearance of a necklace and a kamai, as in Bamiyan bejeweled painting images. We're going to talk again of that. Another one with bare torso, here, appearing both as a bodhisattva and a Buddha, with a piece of cloth looking like a scarf and a pleated part on the shoulder as on early Kushana Buddha images from Mathura. Here. 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 Is sitting on a throne supported by a dragon with tiger legs. Firstly identified as a shadow image from Nagarahara, Hada, it then has been recognized as a Maitreya image due to some features such as the Naga dragon supporting his throne, his flaming halo surrounded by celestial musicians and topped by a stupa, all of Chinese style. A third one, in the pose of Maravijaya, is wearing a crown with a three animal-headed figure and sitting on a throne supported by 2 dwarfish-carrying figures. It has been identified either as Shakyamuni's image while gaining victory upon Mara from the Mahabodhi in Bodh Gaya, or as an image of Ishvaraka, known as a bodhisattva, presumably from Khotan. This image remains enigmatic, but if it is the Maravijaya Buddha from Bodh Gaya, the carrying Ghana figures, looking at the ones in Ajanta Cave 26, probably refer to those on the Vajrasana, while the jewels manifest the glorious body of the Buddha, Sambhogakaya, at the moment of the body. As such, it might then have been, as Polmus proposed, the image that Xuanzang could see when it was provided on special occasions, as attested by 3 Chinese inscriptions in Bodh Gaya, with crown, royal jewels, and golden threaded kashaya. But it could also represent, in a Buddhist docetism, a manifestation of Maitreya, both as a bodhisattva, a Buddha, and a Chakravartin, just as Shakyamuni was. We know, for instance, that in Sri Lanka, Datusena, in the 6th century AD, is reported in the Chulavamsa to have bedecked a Maitreya image, and appointed a guard to it. While in modern and Hinayana context, the Buddha image, Prakeo Morakot in Bangkok, is offered by the king in the hot season, a royal attire of jewels. Indeed, Maitreya, despite his Brahmin origin, has early been associated with royal power. But in Theravadin and Mahayana contexts, and in his images as a Buddha, is also distinguished by his way of sitting in a royal pose. In pre-Mahayana sources, such as Mahavastu and Divyavadana, Maitreya is thus described as a Chakravartin ruler in one previous life. This royal character, devoted to Maitreya, appears in several sources, such as the Chinese version of the Mahaparinirvana Sutra and the Sutra on Maitreya's great attainment of Buddhahood done there on earth. There, Shakyamuni gives his golden thread Kashaya to Kashyapa with the duty to give it to Maitreya as a symbol of his mission and to testify to his Buddha status. So, when Maitreya will open the mountain where Kashyapa is waiting for him, Kashyapa will give him the royal garment, endowing him with a Chakravartin Buddha status. In several other texts, such as Vibhasha and the Chinese translation of the Dharmapada, end of the Samyutta Ratnapitaka Sutra, Shakyamuni refuses Mahapajapati's golden garment, but he suggests her to present it to the Sangha. None of the monks dare to accept it, except Maitreya. Then Maitreya, clad in a golden robe, goes begging to Varanasi and follows Shakyamuni's prophecy, predicting that he will be the future Buddha. Considering material depictions, beside the example on the Dunhuang famous Buddhist image painting, there are several early examples where Maitreya is figured as a bejeweled Buddha or as a bodhisattva, a princely figure with Buddha's character. Since Kushana rule, in Kushana and post-Kushana art from Mathura, Maitreya has been figured with a mixed appearance of a Buddha and a bodhisattva. He may be shown either as a bodhisattva, but with webbed hands. Oops. Yeah. Curls of short hair and orna. Okay, so maybe here. For instance, the one from Aichatra here, or as a Buddha, but wearing jewels and holding a vase, at the one from Mathura and the one in the Musée Guimet, the other two ones. In the veranda of Cave 17 in the veranda of Cave 17 at Ajanta, found in 470, a painted Maitreya with Manushi Buddhas is figured as a bejeweled Buddha. He's sitting on a Vajrasana under his Bodhi tree and wears a three-pointed crown on his long hair, though he's clad with a monk's robe in the open mode, just as the Bodhisattva in monk's robe holding a kamandalu from Guimet. But if we admit that this image might be one of Maitreya, what would be then its contextual meaning? In Central Asia, the association in an iconographic pattern of Bodhisattva Maitreya with Shakyamuni's parinirvana, future Buddha Maitreya and 1,000 Buddhas, has been pointed out in Kizil Cave 80, in Dunhuang Cave 254, and in Kakrak and Bamiyan, as an illustration of sutras of Maitreya and a visualization support to those aiming at being reborn after Shakyamuni's parinirvana in Maitreya's Tushita heaven, in order to have the opportunity to follow Maitreya on his descent on earth and to listen to his preaching and to thus reach nirvana. There, Maitreya Buddha appears sitting among the 1,000 Buddhas on the side walls of the caves, at the crowned Buddha wearing a kamai. Here. And holding an alms bowl. It thus would be Maitreya descending on earth to preach Shakyamuni's law as the first of the 996 next Buddhas, with a total of 1,000 Buddhas, including the 4 past one of the same cosmic era. The association of Bodhisattva Maitreya with parinirvana. Here. Oops. Here. I don't have the picture of the parinirvana. The parinirvana is focusing on Maitreya's role as a mediator and keeper of the Buddhist law after Shakyamuni's death, symbolized by Shakyamuni's bowl, which is said to have been transported in many places, including Vaishali, Gandhara, Khotan, and Kucha, then in Tushita heaven, where Maitreya paid homage to it during a week before being taken away in the Naga world. At the moment of Maitreya's descent, the 4 bowls are expected to be offered again to Maitreya by the 4 Lokapalas, as in the time of Shakyamuni. So, according to this, we may surmise that Maitreya might have been represented in Dunhuang, just as elsewhere in Central Asia, not only as a bodhisattva or a Buddha, but also as a bejeweled Buddha, or even as a crowned bodhisattvas in monk's robe, just as on the 2 banners from Dunhuang kept in Guimet. The issue then is, why are there virtually no Dunhuang banners figuring Bodhisattva Maitreya, while there are so many depictions of him in excavated Buddhist sites in Yunnan, Longmen, Dunhuang, and on paintings from Central Asia, that is Bamiyan, Kakrek, Kizil, Turfan, Fundukistan, Murtuk, and later on from Kocho and Karakoto. Interestingly, the Maitreya figure on a double-sided banner from Murtuk is depicted over a female Atlant figure, reminding the earth deity Prithvi, supporting Vaishravana as figured in Khotan. This is a testimony of the closeness of the two figures, both popular in Khotan, as we know through several sources: religious records from Khotan, annals of the Kingdom of Li, the prophecy concerning Li. That Maitreya is said to have been born there twice as the ruler of the kingdom, first as Vijayasambhava and then as Vijayavirya. But there is only one known inscribed depiction of Bodhisattva Maitreya on a banner from Dunhuang. It is a hand banner in National Museum. It is a hand banner in National Museum of New Delhi. Maitreya Bodhisattva is shown there as a mere Bodhisattva with only a particular crown, not very clear, but certainly differing from typical Bodhisattva diadems with roundels and lotuses. That this banner appears quite isolated might simply signify that Maitreya cults, popular in China all through Sui and early Tang dynasties, since the translation of the Lotus Sutra, and especially after the translations in Chinese of the Sutra on Meditation, on the ascent and rebirth in Maitreya Bodhisattva's Tushita heaven, in 455, and then of the sutras on Maitreya descent and birth down there as Buddha, by Dharmaraja and then by Kumarajiva, were no more important from High Tang period onward. But, as it has been early pointed out, cults to Maitreya did not stop in the 7th century to be superseded by Amitabha and Pure Land cults, as prove material testimonies, as well as the new translation by Yiting in 701 of the Maitreya Vyakarana, Mili Laishi Jing, and the Sutra on Maitreya's descent and rebirth down there on earth. Indeed, Maitreya cults were still practiced in Mogaoku all along Tang and 5 dynasties, and even up to Song dynasties, and were presumably quite popular, apart from the huge images Maitreya Buddha in caves 96 and 130, owing to the revitalization of the Maitreya cult by Empress Wu. It has been reckoned that among all the paintings in Mogaoku, illustrations of the sutra on Maitreya's descent and rebirth down there on earth were in the 3rd rank after illustrations of Amitabha and Vaishajyagura's sutra. Even after the occupation of Dunhuang by the Tibetans, it has been pointed out that Maitreya sutras are still frequently illustrated, either on one of the slopes of the ceiling as in cave 85 and 9, late Tang, early Thong, or else on the south walls next to the illustration of Amitabha Sutra. And as late as the Song dynasty, cave 55 has a shrine that bears 3 monumental groups of Maitreya preaching to the 3 assemblies. There are also a few Dunhuang portable paintings dating from the 9th to 10th centuries, echoing the paintings in the caves, which depict Maitreya as the future Buddha preaching to one of his 3 assemblies in Ketumati. What happens? In Ketumati, such as in the Stein collection, painting 11, or Stein painting in the British Museum with the canopy clouds ridden by apsaras scattering blossoms, a characteristic of Maitreya's preaching in Ketumati. The doubt may remain concerning several preaching scenes that could be either Shakyamuni's or Maitreya's, or maybe both, representing Shakyamuni or Maitreya, and showing, as poem has suggested, a constant type of the earthly Buddha, whose venue is periodical, that we have known, and which we represent as Shakyamuni, but that we await as Maitreya, and a manifestation of the everlasting Chakravartin sitting on the same throne, sitting on the same throne with lions and bejeweled in the same way, sometimes. Stein painting 41. Yeah. Stein painting 41 from the 5 dynasties, 939, shows Maitreya holding the alms bowl, as in Maitreya's images signaled by Miyaji in Bamiyan Valley. It might give a clue to the identification of the somehow enigmatic painting on paper from Paleo collection showing a bodhisattva in monk's robe holding a bow. This figure looks like a bodhisattva with hair tied in bun and 3-section crown. But deprived of long locks on the shoulders, he's holding a bow and a stalk looking like a feathered fan. It has tentatively been identified as Vaisheshyagur, the medicine Buddha. But Vaisheshyagur is generally represented holding a kakara and a bowl and without a crown. The bowl might then merely be the Buddha alms bowl and the symbolic sign of the transmission of the Dharma. But this painting is clumsy, we may recognize, and may have been painted by someone not so aware of the iconographical prescriptions. So the paucity of Maitreya figures on Mogao banners might rather signify that there, in the late Tang period, Maitreya could not be so much a secondary or accompanying figure, as we may infer from the use of banners. Unlike images painted in Mogao caves, figures on Dunhuang banners are isolated from any liturgical context, which would help in giving clues for their identification. We may surmise that they were used as elsewhere in Buddhist context, most probably accompanying other religious items, either statues or other portable paintings, or both. They are reported in sutras, such as the Buddha Name Sutra, to have decorated meditation cells together with flowers, painting, and an image of the Buddha. So we may wonder whether banners with Maitreya might have been paired or not with banners figuring other bodhisattva, possibly Manjushri, Wenshu, or even Kshitigarbha Ditsang, and accompanied larger portable paintings as assisting figures. The pairing of Maitreya with Kshitigarbha Ditsang could be suggested, since they were both associated in Chinese Buddhism with teachings of the decline of Buddhism, and Ditsang worship was linked to the cult of Maitreya, as has been evidenced by Jiru through some archaeological pieces, such as a stele dedicated in 670, and through popular narratives. Here the stele, with on this side Maitreya, and on this side Ditsang. The popular narrative, the story induces that as devotion to Ditsang may bring rebirth into Tushita heaven, or as Ditsang may be a guide who escorts the dead to Tushita heaven, Maitreya himself leads the dying to his own abode, according to the sutra on contemplating the essence to Maitreya Bodhisattva's Tushita heaven, just as Yinlu leads the dead to Amitabha's pure land. Would it be possible then that guiding Maitreya would be depicted thus as a crowned monk, just as Ditsang is portrayed as a monk holding the 6-string and wish-granting jewels? So I go back to the beginning. Here. But among the plentiful bodhisattva images in the Mogao cave, either painted in or below sutra illustrations or sculpted among the main sculpted groups, no image of Bodhisattva Maitreya has been surely identified. Well, not precisely, except on northern wall of cave 329. Whoops. Here. I'm sorry for the picture, it's not very good. Except on the wall of cave 329, combining two different sutras in one scene, where Maitreya is shown twice, seated in Vajrasana, both as an enlightened Buddha in Ketumati, and as a bodhisattva, awaiting his rebirth in Tushita heaven. There, he's depicted as a bejeweled Buddha, or rather as a bodhisattva with crown and monk's robe, just at the one from Ajanta and the one on the banners. This might give a further argument to identify the bodhisattvas in monk's robe on banners in Musée Guimet and BNF as possible figures of Maitreya. But of course, it's only a proposal. Thank you for your attention. I don't know what happens with this.
There's something embedded in the
It's
It's not your fault at all. Thank you so much.
I went very fast. I hope it's okay.
You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Natalie, for this wonderful paper and for your patience especially. You may have seen that we have some technical problems here, and I really admire her. It's so difficult to stand here as a speaker, nervous anyway, in front of an audience in such a great hall, and still keep concentrated on your paper. And it was a very intensive look at the Maitreya iconography. Thank you so much for that. So I think they are trying to fix this now. And I may possibly introduce our next speaker, who has also come to us from Paris, this time from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. And her name is Nathalie Monet. She is the curator of the Pelliot Dunhuang manuscript and Chinese rare book collections at the Bibliothèque. And may I ask her to come to the podium, please.
So I just push this button. Should work. This one. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Among the illustrated scrolls from Dunhuang, none shows more pictorial diversity than manuscript 4524, which was already introduced to you by Professor Victor Meyer yesterday. It depicts the magic competition between Shariputra, one of the closest disciples of the Buddha, and Radharaksha, the master of a sect considered heretical by the Buddhists. The story takes as its starting point a dispute about the construction of a Buddhist monastery in an Indian kingdom at the time of the Buddha. The opponents of Buddhism are against the project, and it is decided that the two parties will fight it out in a contest supervised by the king. Each opponent uses his magic powers to invoke natural phenomena and powerful beasts in order to show his superiority. The story was told by monks in Khotan on the Silk Road as early as the mid-5th century, some 4 or 5 centuries before the present scroll. It became popular in Dunhuang and circulated through texts, oral performances, images on silk and on paper scrolls, and was depicted on large frescoes. To illustrate the episodes of this Buddhist story, painters had to create entirely new scenes or draw their inspiration from existing models. In the process, they could use motifs unrelated to Buddhism, empty them of their original meaning, and infuse them with a new message. I will focus on the central image of the second scene to show that the Dunhuang painter relied on an elaborate pre-existing model which explains its remarkable pictorial quality. The scene depicts the combat between a bull and a lion, the two most powerful beasts of the ancient world. The fascinating clash of these two symbols of power gave rise to a full range of stories and artistic interpretations around the world. It has often been represented since antiquity and appears in the Middle East, in Central Asia, and in China, as well as in the Mediterranean world. In the particular context of this story, the lion represents the Buddhists, or Shariputra himself, or even the Buddha, and the buffalo represents his opponents. The lion has long been associated with Buddhism. In the scroll, it appears as a typical Chinese lion, comparable to other lions like the one on the left of this slide from a 9th century Dunhuang painting. Both lions have the same round face, the same wide open mouth, the same curly and abundant mane, etc. The first to leap into the arena for the second round of the contest is a wondrous water buffalo, which the text describes as really impressive. In the drawing, however, the buffalo is not shown as an imposing beast, but as a completely dominated victim. The value of this image doesn't lie in each individual beast, but in the combination of the two. In fact, it must be considered as one single image of two beasts intertwined together in a struggle. This image belongs to the category described by art historians as a symplegma. The lion is attacking from behind. It has thrown its weight onto the buffalo and has pinned it to the ground. In contrast to the lion bursting with energy, the buffalo looks inert and seems to passively accept its tragic fate. The powerful beast is not defending itself. Curiously, it doesn't even seem to be suffering. One of its front legs is extended, while the other is folded under him. The attacking lion maintains one paw on the spine of its prey while biting its rump. Although the story depicts a magic contest of supernatural powers, blood is spilled to the ground as if the combat were a real one. This vivid detail is not in the text, which specifies that the buffalo soon dissolved. Even its bones were devoured so that the buffalo completely disappeared. The details are worth observing, as they are proof that the image was not created by the painter of the scroll or his predecessor. The image has, in fact, a very long artistic history. The symbolism of the fight between a bull and a lion can be traced back to Mesopotamia 6 millennia ago, but its early meaning remains speculative. A wide range of explanations have been suggested. One scholar mapped out the constellations as they were seen in that part of the world on February 10, 4000 BCE, in order to show the position of the constellations Taurus, represented as a bull, and Leo as a lion. At the time of the spring equinox, Taurus disappears and is replaced by Leo. Using fauna as symbols, the phenomenon is represented by the victory of the lion over the bull. In ancient Mesopotamia, the motif of a lion slaying a bull would not only symbolize the spring equinox, but also signal the beginning of the agricultural year. This attractive interpretation is not, however, shared by all scholars. Here is an early representation of a lion attacking a bull. It is on a Sumerian goblet discovered in the territory of ancient Sumer, dating from the 13th century BCE. Later images are more numerous, like this silver and gold vessel from Mesopotamia in the shape of a bull attacked by a lion. It dates back to the 7th or 6th century BCE. The manner in which the lion attacks its opponent is quite similar to the Dunhuang scroll, and so is the position of the forelegs of the victim, although in a mirror image. The same attitude of tranquil resignation characterizes the face of the bull. This expression becomes understandable and is totally appropriate if we consider that it represents a cyclical phenomenon, an inevitable astronomical event that takes place annually and announces the coming spring. To emphasize the willingness of the bull to be put to death underlines the harmonious replacement of the seasons. The battle between the lion and the bull gradually acquired a distinct political meaning. The motif made the powerful lion a symbol of ruling power. This monumental sculpture in low relief was discovered on the wall of a staircase leading to a 6th century BCE palace in Persepolis. According to one interpretation, which sees the lion and bull as signs of the zodiac, this combination represented the annual New Year's festival performed within the city. More recently, a new political interpretation has been suggested. It would not only represent a great power being overcome by yet greater power, but it would illustrate King Darius's personal political vision of his empire. This large silver plate from Iran shows how the same motif has been transmitted by means of portable objects. Many other tentative meanings have been put forward. The combat has also been interpreted as symbolizing the cycle of life and death, or the astronomical phenomena of day and night, the lion being the sun and the bull the moon. This potent Near Eastern motif has circulated on seals, coins, and other artifacts. It has also appealed to artists in Greco-Roman antiquity who adapted the design to their specific needs for images. They substituted other animals, but retained the shape of the symplegma. I cannot resist mentioning the Greek sculpture from the Musei Capitolini in Rome that was exhibited a few years ago at the Getty Villa. It portrays a lion attacking a horse from the 4th century BCE. For the extraordinary fate of this sculpture and its successive meanings, there is an excellent summary on the Getty website. There are several other examples from Greece, like this piece dating back to 200 BCE. There is again the Roman mosaic that is currently on display at the Getty Villa. It dates from the middle of the 2nd century CE and was discovered in Tunisia. It reinterprets the same motif with the bull being replaced by an onager, which may have better suited the artist's iconographic agenda. As in the Dunhuang manuscript, the blood flows from the attacked animal's spine to the ground. In two mosaic panels from the middle of the 4th century CE, we find the same image, same combat image, except that the lion has been replaced by a tiger which attacks a bovine, here identified as a calf. The position of the tiger is rather similar, with its paw on the spine of the victim. The vanquished animal has a folded foreleg and shows the same passivity. The discovery of two mirror images confirms that the motif could be used on either side. Many examples show the lion attacking the bull from the right, but in some cases it comes from the left. This is precisely the case in the Dunhuang frescoes of caves 9, 146, and 196. This small object from China bears more resemblance to our symplegma. It is a matte weight in bronze, inlaid with gold, silver, agate, and turquoise from the Warring States period or Western Han Dynasty. A much closer image in time and space can be found in the tomb of a man called Yu Hong, who died in 592 CE in Shanxi province. He was probably from Central Asia and served for some time as a Chinese ambassador to Persia. He also served as a sabao, a title given to the supervisor of foreigners living in China. One panel of his stone sarcophagus was decorated with an almost identical motif to the one on the Dunhuang scroll. The precise symbolism of this image is not understood. Yu Hong had perhaps ordered this exotic image because it belonged to a decorative repertoire related to his life in Central Asia and relevant to his high status of sabao. 4 centuries later, the inspiration for the image on the Dunhuang scroll must have probably come again from Central Asia. It is likely that the painter of the Dunhuang scroll copied the motif from an existing painting, sketchbook, or from some other artifact unrelated to Buddhism. Since it suited the story rather well, he used the age-old symplegma to symbolize the victory of Buddhism over its enemies. To my knowledge, the symplegma was not used at later periods in China for other purposes than the illustration of the magic combat. But it continued to circulate in Central Asia and especially in the Arab-Persian world. One of the great illustrated books of the Arab-Persian world is a collection of fables about the adventures of two jackals, Kalila and Dimna. It is one of the earliest and greatest classics in Arabic prose literature. Originally, it is a collection of Indian fables written in Sanskrit, translated into Persian and Syriac, and later Arabic. The first chapter tells the story of the broken friendship between the Lion King and a bull. One jackal introduces the bull at court, and the Lion King befriends him. Filled with jealousy, the jackal persuades the king that the bull intends to betray and attack him. The furious lion then kills his innocent friend. The scene of the fight is usually illustrated in a manner very similar to that of the Dunhuang manuscript. Along with the tale, the fixed iconography circulated throughout Central Asia, Persia, Syria, Egypt, and other regions. We see a fairly basic representation of the fight on this manuscript from the late 14th century. It is nevertheless in line with our model, the bull and the lion being in the same position and having similar features. There's even the detail of the blood flowing from the bull's back. A manuscript illustrated in 1310 in Egypt has an even more simplified rendition of the battle. The image on your left comes from the oldest illustrated manuscript of this tale in the Arab world. The model has been slightly modified. Here, the Lion King takes hold of its victim with 3 of its legs, while the bull bends not 1 but 2 of its legs under the crushing weight to show the overwhelming power of the victorious Lion King and the entire submission of the bull. This model spread through the Arab world for a long time, as seen on the image on your right from the 16th or 17th century manuscript from Egypt. Here is an innovative bird's eye view of our motif. It doesn't, however, alter the details that characterize the symplegma. I will end with Susini, an Italian artist who molded bronze sculptures, sometimes of a lion attacking a bull, sometimes of a lion attacking a horse, as seen here, in a piece also from the Getty collection. In the context of Florence, this motif was neither astronomical nor an insignia of royal power. Neither was it a representation of exotic hunts or the illustration of an episode of a magic religious contest. And it was certainly not about a mortal combat between 2 friends. It simply served to support a new aesthetic in line with the Baroque spirit of the 17th century. The most striking difference is that the victim refuses to accept its fate. It seems to us to bring a more modern approach to the theme. The animal tries desperately to fight back. It shows intense suffering and rebels against its destiny. Its mouth wide open, the animal refuses to die silently. At first sight, we think that this rendering is more realistic than the drawing on the Dunhuang scroll. But when we observe the details more closely, we discover that the 2 images share very similar artistic conventions. This fascinating motif of the deadly combat between a lion and a bovine traveled widely from Mesopotamia circa the 4th millennium BCE to the Italy of the Baroque period and throughout most of the Eurasian continent. The form of this ready-made image remained almost unchanged through the ages, while its meaning changed unceasingly. The textual content of the Dunhuang scroll has been widely studied by Professor Victor Mayer, who has shown its complexity. I hope to have shown that the scroll's iconography is no less complex. The Getty Villa owns several artifacts decorated with the symplegma, and I'm happy to have had the opportunity to show a few more examples from China and the Middle East. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nathalie, for this very interesting paper, taking us through space and time. And I was especially intrigued by the changes of meaning, which cautions us art historians never to associate an image too closely with just one symbolism, obviously. I may now, as our last speaker, introduce a colleague of mine from UCLA, Richard von Glan, who teaches Chinese and world history with a focus on economic history, and therefore he'll talk about, talk to us, I'm not a native speaker, I'm sorry, talk to us about money and the Silk Road economy. Please welcome Professor von Glan.
I'm something of an interloper here, not just because I'm an economic historian rather than an art historian, but also because I have my talk will touch only a little bit on Dunhuang, but rather speak to the wider context of the Silk Road world, and which of course Dunhuang was a very crucial part. Money was indispensable to the rise of Silk Road trade, but the kinds of money used to facilitate trade over the long history of Silk Road commerce repeatedly changed with the ebb and flow of political and commercial currents. An abiding feature of Silk Road commerce was the absence of any single common currency in continuous use from China in the east to India and Iran in the west. Again, to situate you geographically, is this the point? Okay. Here's Dunhuang, of course. In the early centuries of the Silk Road trade, traders favored the southern route from Dunhuang to Lowland, Nia, Khotan, and then to Bactria and down into India and the Arabian Sea. In the later centuries, by the Tang Dynasty, the northern route had become dominant, again going from Dunhuang up to Turfan, Khotan. Samarkand here was the home of the Sogdian merchants who were the dominant traders all throughout the Silk Road, not just out here in the west, but all the way to the Tang capital of Chang'an, where there was a very large Sogdian community. Coined money was first introduced to Central Asia by military garrisons established by the Han Empire. As Professor Rung mentioned this morning, the Han Emperor Wu, after his conquests in the Gansu corridor, established permanent garrisons of Chinese soldiers to defend the Han against the Xiongnu nomads, Dunhuang, of course, being one of those. Another was Juyan up here, from which we have a very large cache of documents dating back to the Han Dynasty, beginning in 119 BCE. And they contain numerous records of salary entitlements and payments to the soldiers who were paid in coin that was shipped to Juyan from the Han capital. We also have bookkeeping accounts, and it includes lots of data on prices for grain, land, clothing, so forth, a lot of evidence for buying on credit and the like. These coins then were not used for trade purposes so much, or at least not for international trade, but rather to pay soldiers, and they in turn used it for their living expenses. We find these coins extending out westward, however, as far to Lowland, to Khotan, but not oddly enough in Nia. This is the typical Han coinage, the Wuzhu coin, which has the classic structure of the round coin with the square hole in the center. Local coinages appeared in Central Asia in the 1st century CE, beginning with Kushan. Again, I don't know if Kushan really deserved the title of empire. It's centered here in Bactria and Gandhara, but it did provide the crucial link that created Silk Road commerce. The Kushan, the nomad overlords of this region, connected the overland oasis towns in Central Asia with India, and then, as you can see, and eventually to the Arabian Sea and over to Roman Egypt. So it's really with the Kushan that we can begin to speak of Silk Road commerce. The Kushan themselves began to issue coins in the early 1st century CE, bronze coins initially, and then in the early 2nd century, gold coins as well. The Kushan coinage was very much in the Indo-Hellenic style. They are bilingual coins in Greek and Kharosthi. The Kharosthi script is derived from Aramaic, which was the official written language of the Persian Empire. It was adopted by the Kushan rulers for their own texts as well. The Kushan bronze coins that you see at the top there did circulate into Central Asia. We find them at Khotan and at Lolan. But the gold coins never seem to have entered into the eastern steppe. They're only found in the Bactria Gandhara region and southward in what's now Pakistan. The other place where we find early local coinage, and roughly about the same time, early 1st century CE, is in Khotan. And these coins are quite interesting. They're also bilingual, using Kharosthi for, on this side, giving the name of the Khotanese king, again, using the Prakrit language, but the Kharosthi script, who is heralded in Persian style as King of Kings. On the reverse, we have the weight of, or value, I should say, of the coin rendered in Chinese terms. And there's a Chinese inscription here that's circular, Tong Qian Zhong Nian Se Zhu. And the coin itself is entirely, again, in the sort of Indo-Greek style of construction. It's struck. It obviously doesn't have the square hole like Chinese coins. So the only Chinese element of this is the Chinese inscription. These coins did not really circulate beyond Khotan itself. So they were really used as a local currency, but it shows that the merchants and people living there needed to interact with both the Chinese and the Kushan monetary systems, had to reckon in both Kushan and Han currencies. After the fall of the Han Dynasty in the early 3rd century CE, coinage really begins to disappear from the trade networks of the Silk Road and is replaced with commodity monies from the 3rd to the 6th century. For example, the Kharosthi documents we have from Nia from the 3rd and 4th centuries record many transactions in land and slaves and livestock. They use measures of grain as the unit of account. Slave prices were given in camels, sometimes in carpets. Taxes were paid in various kinds of commodities, including camels, wine, and textiles. And certainly silk itself served as probably the principal money for long-distance trade during these centuries, the period of disunion in China. This is a bolt of silk from Lolan that was used as money. The image is a little bit misleading. The check pattern is not on the silk. That's just a problem with the scanning. So it's just plain white silk with no design. So this plain silk was used as a common currency in the 3rd to 6th centuries, especially when there was no coinage circulating in this region. But in the 6th century, with the restoration of imperial states on both ends of the Silk Road, the Sassanid Empire in Iran and the Sui and Tang empires in China, coin once again begins to flow into Central Asia, including the Sassanid silver drachma and the Byzantine gold solidi, which circulated as far east as Turfan. The Gaochang kingdom at Turfan, founded in the beginning of the 6th century, was a multi-ethnic town, about 40,000 in population. Most of its residents were of Chinese descent. The long-distance traders were Sogdians from the region of Samarkand. They very much dominated the long-distance trade. But we have lots of documents from Turfan in this period, 6th and 7th centuries, that show that the local herders and farmers were very much drawn into a monetary economy, one that was based on silver. And the silver coinage of Sassanid Iran was brought to this region through Sogdian merchants. By the end of the 6th century, virtually all the loan contracts that we have from Turfan are denominated in silver coins. Land sales, half the time they use silver coins, half the time units of grain. Hired labor was paid in these coins as well. Again, we have an example of just a contract for a relatively short-term loan to cover the cost of spring planting that was made in coins. Nearly all the surviving contracts that we have from Turfan are in Chinese, and they very much reflect the local economy, not the long-distance trade. We don't really have written evidence of the long-distance trade, but clearly this foreign currency from Iran had become the basic local currency as well. Byzantine gold coins had become the dominant currency of the Mediterranean world. In China, we've only found Byzantine coins in elite tombs. This example from the tomb of Tianhong, a general of the Northern Zhou dynasty who died in 576. His tomb is in Guyuan, which is along the road leading from Dunhuang into the Chinese capital. There were 5 of these gold coins discovered in his tomb. They were not really used as money, however. They probably arrived as gifts from the Turkish Khans to rulers in China. As you can see, the coin is punched with holes. It was worn on clothing as decoration rather than being used as money. We do have some references in texts to gold coins as well. This is a tomb inventory, but clearly they did not deposit 20,000 gold and silver coins in the tomb. This is really a ritual testament of value, not referring to actual coins. So the gold coins, to the extent we find them at all in the Chinese world, were merely decorative rather than being used as currency. With the founding of the Tang Dynasty in the early 7th century, the Tang introduced an entirely new coin, the Kaiyuan currency, Kaiyuan Tongbao. Since the Han Dynasty, the various currency issued by rulers in China were always called wuzhu coins, which referred nominally to its weight, but just became a signifier for money. The Tang introduced the Kaiyuan as actually the first currency that doesn't specify its weight in Chinese. That comes to displace the various wuzhu coins issued since the Han, then in circulation. As you can see, this is a coin actually from Kucha. There were copper mines in that region. The Tang set up a mint there, and the very reddish color of this coin is reflective of the local style of or local copper ores of this region. The Kaiyuan coin clearly had a powerful effect on traders and was imitated widely in Central Asia, including in Sogdia itself. This is a coin from that was found in Samarkand, which was issued by a local ruler there, and it's clearly a carbon copy of the Tang Kaiyuan coin. These coins, the Tang coinage, however, did not really, at least initially, penetrate into the Turfan region, where these Sassanid silver coins were still in common use, even after the Tang conquest of Turfan in 640. The locals still preferred to use their silver coins. After the after the Arabs conquered the Sassanid Empire in 651, they continued to issue the same old coins, same style as the Sassanids, for a number of decades. In the 690s, the Islamic coinage undergoes, throughout the Islamic world, a fundamental reform in which they banish all images of rulers and replace those images with pure religious texts, the Shahada, the profession of faith, and so forth. And oddly enough, it's precisely at that moment that silver coinage disappears from Turfan as well. Roughly around 700 or so, the Tang Kayuan coinage comes to displace these Iranian silver coins. Silk, of course, throughout this period is also being used for loans and purchases. After the outbreak of the Dunhuang rebellion in the middle of the 8th century, which devastates the Tang Empire and leads to a withdrawal of the Tang military presence in Central Asia, Tang coinage disappears from Central Asia as well. Indeed, coinage itself disappears. During the Tibetan occupation of Dunhuang from 786 to 848, Chinese coin ceases to circulate in that region. And even after the restoration of Chinese rule, not Tang rule, but Chinese rule in 848, coinage does not make any comeback in Dunhuang itself. We have large numbers of contracts from Dunhuang from the 9th and 10th centuries, but none of them are denominated in coin. They're always in grain or silk. One effort to restore coinage after the Dunhuang rebellion is mounted by the Uyghur Khans, who established themselves at Turfan in the early 9th century in an attempt to revive a coinage in the Chinese style. The Uyghurs were very closely allied with the Sogdian merchants. The Uyghur Khan converts to Manichaeanism, the Sogdian religion, and issued these coins, again, very much in the Chinese style, although with Uyghur inscriptions. These, however, were not issued in any large quantities. They don't seem to have made much of an impact in terms of really being used as money. They were more of a political statement, an expression of the Uyghur Khan's sovereignty, rather than significant in any economic way. So even in the highly commercialized world of the Silk Road, the circulation of money turns out to have been strongly localized. The various kinds of coinage, again, we can see with especially the Tang Kayuan, its influence extending all the way to Sogdia itself, but only for a fairly short period. No coin or currency really dominates throughout the whole Silk Road route. Local commerce was conducted with local currencies, which may be coin, more often silk and other kinds of goods. The imperial currencies did not displace these local currencies, and this remains true even in the era of the Mongol Khanates. They too were unable to establish a unified currency across the Silk Road. So it turns out that the most versatile and long-lived currency of the Silk Road was, appropriate enough, silk itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. This all reminded me a little bit of Europe before the euro. And of course, it goes well with what Susan Whitfield told us before, that the monks traveled together with the merchants, and we only look at the same thing from different sides and from different disciplines, I think. May I ask the speakers to the podium now so we can have some question and answers here. Thank you. We are a little bit short of time, I'm afraid, so I was told we can only take 3 questions. One is there. We have another one here. Okay, why don't you start?
Hello, thank you very much for the very interesting talks this afternoon. I noticed that Susan Whitfield spoke earlier about the interregional movement of goods, surplus wealth, to fund the construction of stupas and caves and their decoration. And I think we saw all of this being played out in all 3 of your talks. And my question is specifically for Valerie, and it's about donors. I noticed in some of the Maitreya paintings, there are some small figures which I thought might be portraits of donors. And if they are, would those help identify the bodhisattvas in the pictures that you showed us?
On the banners, there were no donors. They're all alone, except on the painting from the Paleo collection in the BNF. But that doesn't help because there's an inscription which is not helpful in identifying the Maitreya Millet. That's a problem because if there had been, of course, inscriptions, the question wouldn't have raised. So the problem is that there are much conjectures, of course. This is conjecture because we don't have any inscriptions about that. And that's quite strange. I was struck by this fact that there were so many illustrations. Of course, I didn't show everything, but there were so many illustrations of Maitreya Sutras in Millet Sutras in the Dunhuang Mogao caves, and so few. Well, we have some Maitreya Sutras on big banners, on big paintings, portable paintings, but almost no banners. And well, that was the point. It seems strange. So probably. Well, that's my point. I think they haven't been identified yet. Maybe not. Because the other issue is maybe, I didn't have time to speak of that, but those crowned bodhisattvas in monk's robe, maybe they might also be some images of Dizang, but it seems strange. I think Maitreya would be much more fitting.
There was another question here.
Okay, thanks. My question is for Professor Van Glan. We saw a lot of different religions referenced or represented on the coins, Silk Road religions. Conspicuously missing is Buddhism, of course. So if memory serves, there's some Kushan coinage with things that look like maybe could be Buddha icons on them. Do you see anything else particularly in the Dunhuang, Xinjiang region that might associate currency with Buddhism? If not coins, then perhaps in the contracts or anything like that?
Well, as you say, not that particular one that I showed, but some of the Kushan coinage does show images of Buddhism, and the Kushan themselves, of course, converted to Buddhism, or at least became sponsors of Buddhism. They seem to actually have been fairly eclectic in their religious preferences, but Buddhism was included among those that they were patronizing and that do appear on their coinage. But I would say I don't see any Buddhist motifs on any other currency outside of India itself, of course. but not in any of the Central Asian ones. And of course, the Chinese are non-iconic. They have script but no images, and that becomes the pattern for the Islamic coinage after the 690s. And very interesting to see how quickly the Sasanic coinage disappears once that reform takes place. And the Islamic coins themselves also don't seem to have traveled into the Silk Road once they start issuing them.
And maybe another question. Yes, over there.
What is the difference between a banner and a portable painting, and how were they displayed or used?
It's a question of format and probably the use of it, because the portable painting should be a big one and the mounting is not the same. The banner has a very long format. It's a long piece, probably worn on a stiff or something, a hemp, something very long, probably as in other Buddhist contexts, worn on processions, as you can see in some Buddhist countries and Hinayanist Buddhist countries now. They are just taken on processions with a statue, and the monks bear the banners. So the banners are moved, while the portable paintings, well, it's also conjectures, of course, but if we can if we can have an idea about the Tibetan usage, the big paintings were hanging down in front the monasteries, so probably the portable paintings, which are often much bigger than the banners, much larger, were simply just hung, probably, and not conveyed, but they don't have the same mounting. This is the principal difference. The banners almost always have three-parted or four-parted mountings with a piece which is a kind of a head, a triangular form, which is said to be the head, and some ribbons on the sides and on the bottom with stiffener. So the ribbons are sometimes called the legs and the arms of the banner. So this is a principal difference, because they are supposed to move in the air, to have, while the portable paintings they have a mounting, but they're stiff. Well, they're supposed to stay and not to move in the air. And moreover, the banners, many of the banners are double-sided. On silk, they are double-sided, but also on hemp, as one example was showed, they were painted on both sides. So they were used to be seen on both sides. So to be transported, probably. Well, this is my point, but I think this should be it. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw another hand raised on the other side of the stair. I think maybe we can allow just one more question.
In the video at the Getty Research Institute, there's a reference to Kuan Yin as male, whereas all the Japanese sculptures I've seen of Kuan Yin are female, and I've only seen Chinese sculptures of Kuan Yin as female as well. So I was kind of confused by that. Is Kuan Yin the first transgendered goddess that we...
Probably. Would you know?
Excuse me, I may probably answer that. I have not my advisor, but the advisor of my advisor at Heidelberg University, Professor Zeckel. He insisted that these enlightened Buddhist figures are neither nor. And of course, they are beyond. And he always insisted that Kuan Yin is male, whether Chinese, Japanese, or anything. But I think there are some local cults where, local deities come in, and then there may be some gender issues. But I'm not a Buddhist specialist, but that's what I've learned, and maybe some other Buddhist specialists can answer to that too.
I don't know. Sometimes it's admitted that Guanyin becomes rather feminine in the Song period, after the Song, from the Song period, and before it's still ambivalent, you know, because he looks or she looks very feminine, but with mustaches.
But it's the appearance.
But it's the appearance,
not
yeah.
The meaning
not
of
the meaning.
The
The meaning
iconography,
is a deity. Is just as the Buddha, who is represented without sex at some time. So it's the same thing.
Well, thank you all very much, and I think we have to move on to the next panel. Thank you. And thanks to our speakers as well.